to ServiceSharp, a podcast all about ServiceNow. This podcast is not sponsored or endorsed by ServiceNow in any way, and the opinions expressed are our own. I am Randy Hawes, one of your hosts, along with Jason Gibson. Brent Peters and Justin Klass will also frequently join in. After a short message from our sponsor, we will dive right in. This podcast was made with Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to create and publish your podcast. It's free. Creation tools with it allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Helps you distribute your podcast. It's super simple to publish to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, any of the major ones. You can make money from your podcast. There's no minimum listenership, so they make it super easy to monetize. It's really everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So why don't you go out and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm and get started. We have split this episode into two parts, a Q&A session on our most frequently asked questions for ServiceNow. Let's hear part one.
Again, my name is Jason Gibson. We're going to do something a little different today. We are going to talk about some of the common questions that we get asked just on a normal day-to-day basis. So we're going to have some fun with this. We've each picked a question or two, and we're just going to kind of go through and see if we can't rummage through this kind of stuff. Randy, why don't we get started? Introduce yourself a little bit.
All right. Yeah. Randy Hawes with the Sharpstone Group. And I've worked with ServiceNow for 4 or 5 years now, mainly from a manager of the team type level, not really the guy that does all the technical stuff. I'm just the guy that takes credit for it. So, been in IT for a long time, and that's me.
All right, and Brent, if you would introduce yourself real quick.
Brent Peters. I have been working with ServiceNow as the admin and developer of it for a little over 7 years, but I've been working with an ITSM tool like this for the last 14 and a half to 15 years.
He is who we call the master.
Yeah.
He is Brent actually is the one who started me out on my journey and listened to hours and hours of me completely screw things up, and helping me straighten them up and learn how to get the things right. So I really appreciate you being here. So let's get right into it.
Brent has a lot of patience.
Yeah, more than you guys ever know. Yeah. And I do like argue, so that sometimes gave interesting dynamic there. So, Brent, you have brought a question that you get asked pretty often. What is that?
I get asked quite often by my users and all about what is a configuration item. Configuration items are kind of a tough one because it could be any. If we go with like an ITIL description, a CI could be anything from a person to a piece of equipment to software to anything that the company owns, along with like an asset or something like that. But when it comes down to what really a CI is for a company, it needs to be defined by the business, kind of what they want to track.
Right, exactly. So I try and tell people all the time a CI is literally just an item, right? It's a configuration item. It is something. It doesn't necessarily mean it's something important. But
right.
It is often, it could be anything. It could be a network switch. It could be, the software on a computer. It could be so many different things in the system. And that is the one thing, especially when you get into like software asset management and regular asset management, and into defining, well, what's important to me, asset, what CIs do I want to track for monetary value? Well, then it becomes an asset,
Yep.
But people get that so confused because they see a CI and a CMDB together, and they say, well, a CI is all just my computers.
Right. Well, there's that. And then there's also some people that just want to take it down to the minute level of this piece of memory that's in this computer is a CI. But you can do that, but that's a little overkill for things. You kind of want to keep things that are more important to what's going to keep your business up and running. You also want to kind of keep it to a larger system, most likely, like servers, workstations, network equipment. Workstations is kind of iffy in some cases. You don't want to put like every piece of software you have installed as a CI. That's more for your software asset management kind of stuff. If you're doing a CI or a configuration item, you want it to be useful. You don't want garbage in there.
You want to be able to track like a change, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So what did we do a change on that caused that outage, right?
Right. And it's also the base to a lot of the processes, because all the processes like change management, incident management, request management, problem, all that stuff kind of ties to a CI in one way or another, so that you can know what all is happening in your system.
Yeah, I think that, an easy way to kind of look at it is, do you want to report off of it? If you want to report off of it, it's going to be a CI, probably. If you want to track a trend, or if you want to check to see if there's going to be a collision whenever a change is implemented or things like that, then, those things are kind of CIs, but you're not going to report on like the RAM chip, as you said, in an individual desktop PC whenever you're trying to figure out the root cause of, a system, an internal process or something like that. Then you're not going to be running daily reports that show you, individual RAM chips across the organization.
One of the things that I see most useful with the CIs is being able to say, okay, we had 10 incidents on this particular computer model, right? So this particular computer model, we've been having problems. There's been a lot of incidents on it, being able to report on it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an asset, because you don't necessarily care if it has a lower, if it's, a lot of companies don't care about anything under $10,000, right? They don't want to track those as assets.
Right.
So the computer would be an asset in your asset database, but it would be a CI to be able to report on, to say, hey, it goes up for time to try and figure out what next model of computer you're going to get as an organization or standardize. You look at that and go, man, it looks like we've had a bunch of problems with this one, so let's go a different route, right? So just better decision making.
That kind of brings up another question. So a CI doesn't necessarily have to be a physical object, right? It can just be a representative object, like Windows Server can be a CI.
Yes. You kind of want to, I would think, personally, I would try to stay away from generalization, like an other. You don't want to put other in CI, because you're going to end up with everybody putting that. You also want to say virtual machine, because anytime somebody calls in about a virtual machine, they're going to log it to that instead of the specific issue. But it does not have to be physical. It can, in fact, a virtual machine could be one. So you can have a virtual server listed or whatever.
Like if you have ITOM, right, that you can integrate with AWS, you could integrate with, with lots of different web-based systems that, are virtual servers.
Right. Yep. Most of the time, I would have to say that a CI, though, is something that your corporation owns. You usually will not put somebody else's CIs in your database. I could see a few exceptions to that, but most of the time it is going to be something that your company owns or supports because it is part of your process.
Right, ServiceNow, right? We don't, ServiceNow is a good example of a CI that's useful, that we don't actually necessarily, we have a contract with ServiceNow, but it's a SaaS system, SaaS offering. So, that gets a little iffy, but if it's in there, you can say, well, I'm going to do a change. Because I'm going to do a change to the ServiceNow instance, I need a standard change or a normal change or whatever. And you know what's going on. You get a better picture of everything.
Right. You don't own any hardware with it unless you have like mid servers or something.
Right.
It. But you don't, with ServiceNow itself, you don't own hardware. It's just a corporate application that you use, but that could still be a CI. So there is some gray lines. It's just, it gets kind of confusing to some people.
I know that one of the big conversations that I frequently get involved in is with people confusing, CIs and assets as being the same thing, as, using those terms interchangeably.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're not. There's relationships between the two, but they're totally different.
An asset can be a CI, but just because something is an asset does not make it a CI.
Right. And just because it's a CI doesn't mean it's an asset either. So.
Correct.
Yeah. So there's some intricacies in all of this, and people it's hard for people to understand because nobody's broken it down for them. They just know what they see,
right?
And they haven't been truly explained what things are. I know that in lots of organizations, they're still trying to figure out what these things are. A good example is a customer I was working with just could not get asset straight. They were trying to do asset management, and they kept saying, well, here we have all the CIs, but you haven't built out asset. You haven't told the system what you care about yet. Right. What you want to track monetarily. Yep. And so it was kind of like it's a culture shift for them to start changing that mindset. And the first thing to say, well, we just want to track everything.
Yes. And it's a little overkill. And I've also seen, I kind of lost my thought there.
Oh, yeah. Well, haven't you seen that turn on Discovery and it discover 3 million CIs?
Yes. If you turn on Discovery, you want to kind of limit what you're scanning for the things that you want. And there is a difference between, lack of a better word, configuration and actually pulling in inventory from your Discovery. Inventory can give you information about your CIs, like here's the server, and then you have inventory of the CPU, the memory, what patches, that kind of stuff are all on there. But just because it's inventory does not mean it's a CI. It's kind of confusing in ServiceNow because they have configuration items, and all those end up in the configuration item tables. But part of that is just inventory that's pulled in so you get more info about it. It also helps with your relationships, that kind of stuff.
Right.
What I was also saying is, our thing is configuration management is the base of all this stuff. So if you talk about, it was ITIL 3 and all that. We now have ITIL 4, but ITIL 3 said configuration is the foundation. Let's say all the processes build a house. Configuration is the foundation. And if you don't have a good foundation, the other ones are going to struggle. And in several customers that I've dealt with, that is true. If they didn't have good CMDBs and configuration items defined and all that, and the other processes all suffer because of that.
But I've also come to realize, though, that there's never an end to it.
No.
There's never a fixed CMDB. It's never done. It is a massive ongoing effort to maintain quality data.
Right, and you're always going to be doing CSI on it, or the continual improvement on that. So,
which is why it's so important to think about the process before you start doing the process.
Yes.
And it's also why, implementing ServiceNow goes beyond IT, and it goes beyond needing to learn ITIL or to have an understanding of ITIL. It goes beyond just the IT department in your company, because it is a cultural thing when you start to implement it, and it impacts other places and other parts of the company. And so the most you can do, or the as much as you can do as possible to educate and make clear what the processes are and what the terms mean and what the procedures are, the better off that CMDB is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Man, all right.
So now throw something in there so that I sounded like I was part of the group.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So you had an interesting question. So why don't you go ahead and let us know what your question is?
So me?
Yes.
You like Randy.
So no. Well, what I get asked is, what is ServiceNow? People want to just. You start talking to it, it's like, well, what exactly does ServiceNow do?
Right.
And that's a
loaded question, right?
It's a loaded question because it changes every 6 months, right?
Yeah. Well, it changes every 6 months, but it's also a development platform. People don't understand that. They see it as it's just a ticketing tool. You know how many times I've been told that ServiceNow is just a ticketing tool? That it's the biggest, load of manure in the world, because it's not. It does do ticketing, but it is a MySQL database that allows you to not only do different processes like ITIL or like your HR and your ITSM and all the other bits and pieces that come together. And each time you put something together, it becomes exponentially better.
Well, historically though, it did start with incident response kind of as a foundation, right? It was set up to be a competitor to like Remedy or something like that.
He's Fred Luddy started it out as a platform, and to demonstrate how the platform as a service would work, he threw some incident management, some change management stuff in there. From my understanding, this is what it was, just to show how easy it was to do this stuff. And then people were like, hey, that's pretty cool. I want to use your ticketing system. And he's like, always was like, it's more than just that. One of the biggest slogans for the longest time was it's platform as a service.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many custom applications you can put into this. You could build out of the scoped apps and that kind of stuff.
I think now the preferred way to refer to it is not as ServiceNow; it's as the Now platform, isn't it?
Yes, yeah,
now the Now platform, yeah. Which is, but I'm going to tell you, people still can't get it through their heads, and I can't tell you how many times I've been so I built applications for hospitals, for public facing, forms for them to request for second opinions. I've done encrypted databases. I've done reinforcement applications, very similar to what you see with Concur. You can build anything because you have this massive tool that allows you to have an unlimited imagination what you do and the processes you do. And so that's the hard thing to get through people's heads.
It's an easy platform to understand. It's a bunch of tables that you can get to easily. You can the scripting, the JavaScripting, the Angular, all that kind of stuff, Angular JS, all that stuff is easy to learn and do. It's got a great UI that you can play with. Just making custom apps in it is so easy. Like Jason was saying, I've made several custom apps to fit into little niches that the companies I've worked for have needed because other applications couldn't do it.
It's like
one of the ones I just did was the place that I was working at got a new EMR, but they didn't have anything in the EMR, the medical record system, that allowed them to track when they changed the costs and everything. So we built something in ServiceNow so they could say, here's the new cost, here's what it was, goes through approvals. It then would open IT tasks related to that for IT to do their job and everything. It just filled that niche that nobody had out there.
And people understand.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the thing is also that, it can consume information from almost every other platform out there and then send it back as well. I mean, I know that we've done integrations with Workday, integrations with PeopleSoft, integrations with vendors, integrations with, Cisco and Microsoft, all sorts of, if you can name it, you can integrate with it. And even if it doesn't have a built-in integration, it's got a great API that you can use and build your own.
It's got an amazing REST API. You can do REST, you can do SOAP, you can run half a dozen different kind of scripts inside ServiceNow, and pull from ServiceNow half dozen ways. You like PowerShell, you can use PowerShell. You don't like PowerShell, you can use REST. You can use JavaScript. I mean, it's a very open platform to be able to get in there. But with that openness, it's also extremely secure. And this is what I find interesting, is that there are, it is considered a SOX application in a lot of organizations I've worked with. There's been applications or other companies I've worked with that keep PHI in it, in what they call edge encrypted, which is encrypted fields inside the ServiceNow platform. And it's just amazing that the diversity of things that it can do and does do.
And it also allows you to do a lot of automations too. Even with orchestration, the add-on, the plugin that you has a little bit extra cost to it, you can do it through orchestration, or you can even do it through just the automation of like workflows or the other things that you have access to within the tool. You don't have to pay that extra cost.
Well, and think about the cost savings, and I think that's where people don't think ahead enough. You look at ITOM and you look at, okay, so a server goes down and there's a problem in the middle of the night, and then it sends an alert. That alert that there's a problem, it comes up. Well, you can set it to reboot the server. Mm-hmm. Not to mention you can do that before on-call even hits.
Right.
So you can resolve problems without waking somebody up in the middle of the night and paying them $150 an hour to get their rear ends out of bed and go fix it.
The client I just was working with, they wanted to automate their virtual builds for their servers. And so we built a catalog request to ask for it. It goes through an approval process using REST and SOAP calls back and forth. We initiate the build, we wait, and we get the response back. If it ever comes back an error, we assign tickets out to get it fixed. All that automation is done within the catalog and REST calls and stuff like that. So that automation is great. You can automate things and save time and save people's hours. So people weren't manually creating these VI machines before. Now we have an automated system that makes it quicker too.
Well, and one of my mottos in life has been, for the last 10 years of my life, doing more with less, because every single day I find that I'm having to learn how to do more with less resources, whether there's just more work to be done, or where sometimes it's our own success that is causing it, right? We're victim of our own success. And so we have so much more to do. Well, in order to keep up with it, we have to find unique ways to automate as much as possible so we can do more in less amount of time, or at least the same amount of time every single day. And that's what ServiceNow does really well.
Well, I mean, think about it. No one ever got into IT because they like doing the same thing over and over and over again. Right?
Right. Yeah. It's true. Very true.
That's kind of why I got into it. But Oh, wait, no, that's
Yeah,
not.
Brent, he wanted a boring life. That's why Brent got into it.
Well, I was thinking my philosophy is doing more with less because I have 6 kids. So.
The cutest thing in the world. She's 6. It's funny because we're all about the same age. Myself, Randy, and Brent. Brent's actually the year older than me. But I have a 6-year-old and 10-year-old. Brent has children that are already out of the house, right?
Yes. I mean, start young, and I have the rest of my life to live now.
Well, I split the difference because my oldest is 22 and my youngest is 7. So
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, Randy, you got the best of both worlds. We're going to call it. That's what we're going to call it.
You could call it that, I guess. I guess it depends on the time of night and how much sleep I've had.
Yeah. All right. So, guys, we're going to take a quick break.
That wraps up part 1. Please stay tuned for part 2 coming soon.